Hello all of you out there, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the best small carnivores. In at number 10 is the Megalosaurus, and this creature in my opinion is quite underrated, and it definitely does fit into those small carnivores like you'd say the Carno is. The Allo kind of turns into a medium-sized carnivore, so that doesn't really count on this list, and the Allo isn't going to be on this list. And then obviously creatures like the Rex are going to count as a big carnivore. That is just my kind of justifications for boundaries, but I still think this is on the upper end of smaller art carnivores, and it can fit into a lot of caves on the island, and you can see it compared to the Carno there, although it didn't have that for that long, as it did absolutely decimate the Carno, but they're pretty much the same size. And in terms of their abilities, they have a lot, and they are extremely useful in Arboration, as it is essentially always nighttime, obviously unless you're on the surface, but you can only go to the surface at nighttime, you can't go to it at the day, so these things will work 24/7 all the way around the clock. Whereas on other maps, these things don't work all the time, they will only work in the night time. In the day, they're drowsy and sleepy, and pretty much useless, but in the night they really do turn into an absolute beast with a wealth of abilities, and they can even grab small creatures in their mouth and just tear them to shreds. It is absolutely insane how powerful these creatures are and just how much damage they deal, and considering their size as well, these things are some of the best carnivores when it comes size to damage ratio, which is something which is very useful, as these things are extremely easy to transport if you don't have something like a cryopod, and they will pack a punch every time. And on Arboration you can even use them for Rockwell on the boss, which is obviously, I don't know why I said it like that, just the Rockwell boss on Arboration you can use these things for. Next up is the Managama, and this creature you may not say counts as a carnivore, but it is still a carnivore, and the reason for that is it isn't just the general theropod type thing like the Megalosaurus. There's your kind of standard definition for carnivore, but this is the carnivore as well. And obviously there aren't too many flying carnivores on the list, and technically this doesn't really count as flying, but there are 3 flight carnivores on this list, and this is one of them. In terms of the Managama's use, it is now significantly less used than it was, but it was a great option for PvP griefing, and it still is to this day for many reasons, namely obviously its freezing ability, and also the fact that its speed is absolutely insane. No other art creature can really compare to it, although it is quite difficult to control in the grand scheme of things, so that will take a little bit of a learning curve, but it definitely isn't as difficult to control as the gas bag. That creature is just out of this world difficult in my opinion in terms of how that thing controls. But there is something which you'll definitely need to take into account for this creature. It is extremely buggy, and you'll get it stuck in a lot of things. In this case here, I just got stuck in the wall, and here you can see that freezing ability being utilized, and it can freeze them for so long. It is so OP. Obviously it was more OP before it got nerfed, but it still is very OP still to this day. Next up, we have the Carno, and in my opinion, I am definitely a Carno lover, and you'll see this is ASA B-roll. Again, I'm updating my B-roll over time, and full ASA B-roll will obviously be introduced once all of the maps are here, but I am getting around to doing all of the creatures on the island. I promise I will get there at some point. But you know, at least the Carno still has some ASA B-roll for you, just if you haven't had an insight yet in terms of the graphics. Obviously this isn't higher settings, but it isn't the lowest settings either. It's kind of got it on medium, but a little bit higher in terms of, I think I've got foliage higher, and I've got lighting on high as well. But shadows on low and shadows on high will make a big difference, but you'll need a stronger graphics card, and I will be buying one of those after Christmas. Pretty much midway through January I should have that new card in. Either way, in terms of the Carno's abilities and why it is so good, this creature is great obviously for its size being so small and compact. It's easy to travel around, but also with this thing on top of all of that, it deals an extremely high amount of damage, and it does have the bleed ability too. I'm somewhat disappointed with the Carno's weight, although that's something which doesn't matter too much, and its stamina is pretty good as well, which is definitely something you want on a carnivore. And again, that bleed ability is so so useful. You can just deal so much damage with this thing, and again, the fact that it's this small and it has the bleed ability, it is great. And the only thing which could really make it better is if it had obviously that better weight stat and it had the pack buff, which something like the Aloe will give you. But just the way the Carno is modelled with its tiny arms and its character, it really is a much more appealing creature to me. Although the Carno and the Aloe pretty much have the exact same taming method, and on ASA the Carno and the Aloe are some of the easiest tames, as obviously their babies are really easy to find around. In at number 7 is the Bloodstalker, and this is again a creature which you could technically count as a flyer, and if you do, then there are 4 flyers on this list, but I don't really count this as a sort of flyer or glider, really. It is a kind of just, I don't really know, it is an airborne creature of some kind, and obviously it is going to be on this list as it is a carnivore. Its taming method literally uses blood as well, so this is definitely a carnivorous creature, but I'm sure you wouldn't be countering that point anyway. And in terms of the use of the Bloodstalker, this is obviously pretty much the only way to get around on Gen 1, as flyers aren't allowed on the map, but considering flyers aren't allowed on Operation as well, the Bloodstalker is great on that map, especially considering there are so many things for it to grab onto, as it definitely does need some verticality in the map to work in its best. On Valguero here, it does actually work pretty decently, as there are a lot of tall trees around and there are loads of cliffs in the chalk cliffs area, so you still can get around pretty well in Valguero. So if you wanted a Bloodstalker on Valguero, you could, but you still, I think, are going to need a DLC map to get Bloodstalker. Wait, no, you're going to, Fjorda has Bloodstalkers, right? Does Fjorda have Bloodstalkers? I'm pretty sure it does. Fjorda does seem to have a lot of things. I'm pretty sure Fjorda has Bloodstalkers. Does Fjorda have Bloodstalkers? Comment down below if you actually know, because I'm not quite sure on that one. I haven't really played much Fjorda, but if they're not on Fjorda, then you will need a DLC map, but I'm not really sure on that one, and I think they should be on Fjorda. And also in terms of their other abilities as well, these things can grapple in creatures as well, dealing a lot of damage to the creature, and I think it heals up the Bloodstalker as well, but don't quote me on that. Now, the Shadowmane has always been known, ever since it came out, for being a really OP carnivore, and obviously again it fits into that small size bracket. The Shadowmane is one of the smallest carnivores that packs one of the biggest punches. It is just not comparable in any way. The Shadowmane is just so good at its job in every single way. It is just, yeah, it's actually a real wonder how this creature came around. But it is Gen 2, I guess, and Gen 2 is a really OP map. In terms of its abilities, like you've seen there, it can jump insanely high. It also has the hydration buff, like the Spino, which I think only it and the Spino share, and it also does have pack buffs, and it can go invisible too. In the presence of a male or a female, it's one of those, I can't remember which one it is, but it is something like that. But if you do have a boy and a girl Shadowmane, I don't know why I said it that weirdly. Either way, you have a male and a female Shadowmane together, and then that ability should work. I'm not sure which way around it goes, but it's one of those. The only real downside with this thing is obviously its awful taming method. In at number 5 is the RG, and this is obviously one of those creatures which is just so respected by the art community, and it is just really one of those essentials. And again, ASA footage is back. There is a few creatures on this list with ASA footage, and actually the next one does have ASA footage as well. But obviously in terms of the RG's use, this is by far the best creature for transporting metal. Nothing really compels, what is that word? Nothing really is comparable to this creature in terms of what level the saddle was unlocked for this creature and how good it is for that level, because it's in the late 60s. I'm pretty sure its saddle is also really cheap as well, and acts as a portable smithy, which is a really nice bonus, but no other creature at this level can do it as well as the RG. The Quetz simply has a too high of a level saddle, and its tame method is absolutely atrocious unless you have a net gun. And the Rhino Ganatha is a long process, and its saddle is unlocked near level 100. I think it's 97. Have no idea why I can't speak today. And also the fact that the RG can pick up a wealth of creatures as well, a lot more than Pteranodon, is extremely useful, especially when paired with the Anki. Those things are like bread and butter together. You really should try it at some point, and you'll have a great time with the RG and Arc, and you'll never regret taming one. Next up, we have the Baryonyx. And viewers of this channel who have known me for a while or have watched quite a lot of my videos will know that I really like the Baryonyx in so many ways. This is my go-to craving creature. Craving creature? What is a craving creature? Go-to caving creature. No idea why I can't speak today. But yes, this is the go-to caving creature for me, mainly because of its size and the fact that this is a small carnivores list. It makes sense why it is on this list, and yes, because of its size, it means it can fit into loads of caves, but it is really quick, really agile, and also really skinny, which some other smaller carnivores, like the Sarco, don't really have. And I would mainly kind of put that thing maybe into the kind of larger carnivores, possibly because of how simply long that thing is, and also the fact that it can't fit through small dinosaur gate. Well, I can't really say anything, as I think the Managama is a bit bigger than the Sarco, but you know, I would maybe stay away from calling that a small carnivore. And obviously the fact how wide it is means it isn't compatible for most caving runs, and obviously the Barry does a very decent amount of damage to actually make it a good caving creature. And again, its speed is very useful in those tight caves, as you can quickly get out of any tight situation which you may end up in. In at number 3 is the Velonosaur, and this creature really has grown on me in the past weeks, as previously I would have put the Baryonyx probably in at number 1, but that it really is not a valid thing. There are so many other creatures which are better than the Baryonyx, and I know a few months ago, or even maybe a couple of weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago, I may have not said that, but the Velonosaur is one of those creatures which has really stood out to me, as I have been replaying Extinction recently. And the fact of just how exciting this creature is to use, and how fun and enjoyable it is to use, and also how useful it is, makes this one of the best small carnivores. It's great for caves as well, as it is a similar size to the Baryonyx, albeit a little bit wider, so it isn't as great for caves, but still it is very much within that right size range. And compared to the Barry, you can do long distance firing, and this thing is essentially just a portable turret which no other Arc creature can do, and it is just such a cool ability to have, which I really don't get why other Arc creatures don't have, as this is one of my favorite Arc creatures to use at the moment, and I really like this ability. And I hope the Arc, or Wildcard I should say, revisits this creature at some point, as they can make this thing even better in future. I know it. In at number 2 is the Deinonychus, and this thing really does have to be high on the list. This creature is just one which really can't be missed, and if you are missing this creature, then you're doing something wrong. The Deinonychus needs to be on this list, obviously because it is a very small carnivore, and because of how easy and how great this creature is. Very easy taming method, I should have specified that, I don't know why I just said easy with no context, but very easy taming method, and very useful creature. The first ability of which you can see here. It can literally rip creatures to shreds by grappling onto them, and they don't even let go until I think they run out of stamina, which is insane, as these things' stamina drain is so low. And if it was an Iguanodon, then that would be the most OP thing, as in one stance the Iguanodon simply doesn't lose stamina, but I think it still does anyway when you attack. Slightly invalid point, but the Iguanodon will not lose stamina 1 on all 4s. Don't know why I said 1 on all 4s. My brain is really not thinking properly today. But in terms of the Deinonychus's other abilities, this thing is great at not taking full damage, as it doesn't take full damage, but it is also superb at climbing up any kind of wall or vertical surface, not as elegantly as some other creatures, but still as efficiently overall. It may be a little bit harder to control, but you get the hang of it at some point, and really, I don't have the hang of it because I don't use this creature all too much for traveling. I mainly use it for bosses, as this thing is just so OP, as its bleed carries to bosses, which no other Arc creature has. And finally, in at number 1 is the Desmodus, and this is the last flying creature on the list. and if you did count from earlier, then you would have known that a flying creature would have been in at number 1. And the Desmodus really is just that creature which you should go to at some point, and it has the same tame method as the Bloodstalker. This thing obviously drinks blood as well. Or would you say eats? You definitely say drinks, right? Blood is a liquid. What am I thinking of? Yes, it drinks blood, but obviously it's going to consume it, and that's the tame method. You have to have blood bags, and this thing is also a blood bag farm, which no other Arc creature has the ability to do. Pretty sure it has night vision as well, or can go invisible. I didn't get that to work on Extinction. It can also grapple onto walls, and I think ceilings as well, like a bat would. It has the glide ability, like you've seen there, and it can make sanguine elixir, I think, from blood bags, if I am correct there, but I'm not sure of the exact recipe. Either way, you can craft it in its inventory, and that is an absolute cheat, as it will do a third of any tame for you, which is really, really OP, and I can't wait for this thing to come into ASA. The top 10 most underrated Arc Dinos, Part 2. In at number 10 is the Chalicotherium, and I think, in my opinion, this creature is severely underrated for so many things, as this actually is a pretty decent combat creature, and albeit its tame is very weird, requiring a lot of beer, which is something no other tame uses, and it can be a bit of a pain to get. It is actually a really good combat creature when you actually have one to use, and it is great, and especially on smaller creatures, it has insane knockback, and it can even throw boulders as well, and that is a simply great ability which can't be missed. So you really should give the Chalicotherium a try at some point, and you will definitely not regret the tame. Next up, we have the Bloodstalker, and you may say that this is a controversial one, as it is used a lot in some cases, but I would actually say that this creature isn't used enough, and everyone should be using a Bloodstalker if they can obviously get their hands on one. These things are just so useful, and they're so quick, and they're really great in the water as well. And I don't see too many people using these things for water cave runs on the island, which I have been doing in recent times. Obviously, it makes sense that you wouldn't be doing that in ASA, as the Bloodstalker isn't in ASA at the moment, but in ASC there really isn't any excuse, because I think these things do spawn on Fjorda. If not, then I'll take that back, but I'm pretty sure that they do spawn on Fjorda, which means that there is a free DLC out there with Bloodstalkers. Either way, you can use a spawn command as well, and then tame one from wild if you want to do that to get access to that creature. And I really think you should really try and get your hands on one of these things, as they are some of the most useful creatures out there. They can travel around the map really fast, like I've said. They deal a lot of damage, and on Gen 1 and on Gen 2, they're pretty useful for loads of missions as well, and they are really splendid water creatures. So what isn't to love about the Bloodstalker? Maybe apart from its taming method. Now, the Carno has to be respected when it comes to Arc, at least in my opinion, because this is one of the most useful creatures out there to me, especially in the earlier stages of the game. This creature just has so much to like about it, from its bleed ability to its speed and its ridiculously easy tame, especially on ASA. If you're an Allo lover though, then you can always go for the Allo over the Carno, but there is a certain charm in the Carno which I don't get from the Allo, and I'll usually not even tame Carnos and go for an Allo. But the Allo is obviously the significantly more popular tame, and I would kind of lean that more towards the overrated side of Arc creatures, but I would say it's not particularly overrated or underrated, and it kind of is where it should be. Whereas the Carno is really just not respected enough in my opinion, and I wish people used it more, especially considering when Squid used it back in the day, that was like basically the best creature to him. Obviously Rexus was sort of kind of more respected, but that was also like 2016 Arc, and back then Rexes were just like the most highly respected creatures, where now Rexes really aren't that much of a big deal anymore. Now, the gacha has not really been talked about ever since Extinction came out. Obviously, this is still a very useful creature, which a lot of people out there, I'm sure, do use, but I do think it deserves a lot more press. But I guess it kind of does get a little bit of press, considering Gacha Claus comes around every Christmas. But still, the actual gacha really isn't used as much. Although it is somewhat of an icon, people really don't use it all that much, and its abilities are really ones to be respected. Now, the element dust thing is a little bit out of date, considering that element is so easy to get on Gen 2, but all of those weapons which you can get from this thing is not accessible from any other source, really. Obviously, drops are a thing, and this is going to become even less useful when Extinction's out on ASA, because drops are OP, but I really think this creature should be respected and used more to this day. Now, next up, we have the Megalosaurus. And this creature really is one of those creatures which I have to put on this list. And albeit when Arboration came out, this thing was used so much. And if you are playing Arboration, you're probably going to use this thing. But nowadays, this thing kind of seems somewhat forgotten about. And it is literally one of the best carnivores in the game, especially considering its size. And it is so iconic, and it has a wealth of abilities to go on top of that as well. And albeit the mechanic of it only really working at nighttime isn't one which is the best compared to some other carnivores, but it is really great on Arboration, considering that it counts as always being night, which is obviously why these things are very useful. Also, there you can see one of the abilities that this creature has, which is when it can grapple creatures into its mouth. Obviously, it can't really do that with really large creatures. It'd be very weird if it could do that with something like a Rex, but smaller creatures, it can do that, and that is a very efficient way to get rid of Microraptors. And what absolute nuisances those creatures are. So it is really great that you can get rid of those things with this thing. And also on top of that, in terms of its size, it is a really good size for transport, making it a pretty good travel dino as well. And as my go-to on Arboration, if I'm getting a Rock Drake for the first time, I'll just bring one of these things down, obviously a good level, so it can withstand all the things down there, and then I will get my first Rock Drake egg, and then from there I will use a Rock Drake to get down there. But still, the Megalosaurus is a very good travel mount and a very good carnivore overall, and I think the general public should use it more. In at number 5 is the Spino, and this creature, in my opinion, really isn't respected as enough as it should be. In terms of its popularity, yes, it isn't going to be the most underrated creature out there, but that is why it is in number 5. But in terms of its use compared to its popularity, it is very outweighed compared to something like the Rex, which albeit doesn't get as much press as it used to back in the early days of Ark. And that is because the Rex just simply isn't the strongest dinosaur in the game now. And I think at a point when the game released it was, then the Alpha Rex came around, and then Gigas came around, and then, yeah, the Rex really wasn't respected as much. But the Spino back in the early days was respected a lot, actually, as this was just considered the stronger carnivore by so many people out there, and loads of you probably used this thing back in the day, and I used it then. And obviously it still does have enough popularity to warrant a TLC, as Wildcard did give it one of those, so now it can stand on its hind legs, it has the hydration buff, and it's just overall a better creature. But in terms of it compared to the Rex, I actually vastly prefer it because of its increased mobility, the fact that it is great in the water as well, and the fact that it deals a little bit more damage than the Rex, although its health is significantly lower, which is where its main drawback is. But if you do some good breeding on these things, and you get loads and loads of health mutations, you can have yourself a Rex equivalently health Spino, and then you'll have yourself a really great boss creature. And it's actually a shame that these creatures aren't used as much as they should be, in my opinion, especially considering they got that TLC. Next up, we have the Mantis, and this creature is really, again, not used as much as it should be, and it has a really cool ability, And I know quite a lot of you PvE players out there do use the Mantis, but to PvP players and also just the general Ark community, I would advise you tame a Mantis at some point. They are just so good, and there really isn't an excuse to not tame one unless you're on mobile, obviously, as these things spawn on Ragnarok. And they are ridiculously easy to tame once you've already done the prep. You've got the ghillie, you've got the bug repellent, and you've got the woolly rhino horns. It's just a very simple passive tame, and you have yourself pretty much one of the best harvesters in the Ark game. And I especially use it for harvesting mutton with swords, obviously, as it is just a really great way of doing it. But it is also great at gathering metal with picks, obviously. You can gather great stone with hatchets. You can use pikes as well, which I will use for the manticore on Scorched Earth. If I'm ever doing it, I won't use swords, I will use pikes as the durability is better. And they can pretty much wield any melee weapon which you choose them to, making them an absolute harvesting god. They can't wield tech weapons though, that would be a little bit too OP. In at number 3 is the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature in my opinion is one of those which is severely underrated, as it is pretty much the easiest tame in the Ark game. The only real downside it has is obviously that level 65 requirement, which is a bit of a shame really, but apart from that, this is a literal perfect creature to me. It is the same as a wyvern in reality, and it has a much easier taming method, just requiring some crystal. You don't need anything else. You can just go on a note run and then get the necessary crystal, and in your first even hour of playing, you can probably have one of these wyverns at your disposal. On single player, obviously. On official, I think that is a bit too optimistic. But even on official, these things can be obtained pretty quickly with a good note run. And also, if you get the blood crystal wyverns as well, you have yourself an even better version of the crystal wyvern. That creature is definitely by far the best version of the crystal wyvern, and considering their mobility and power, which is I'm pretty sure the same as an exact wyvern, at least it feels like it to me when using one, you really can't go wrong with these things, especially considering they don't need a saddle. And earlier than the Pteranodon, as long as you do a note run, you can get these things really quickly into your roster of creatures. So what isn't to love about this thing? In at number 2 is the Beelzebufo, and this creature is the absolute king when it comes to cementing paste gathering, obviously doing that through killing any kind of insect, and especially considering ASA only has the island at the moment and insect levels aren't a thing on ASA, this is the best time if you have ASA obviously to get a Beelzebufo, and it still is a great idea on any other Ark map where these things spawn and there are insects, which I think is every Ark map that has the Beelzebufo. Not sure if the Beels is on every map though, as I don't think it would be fitting on maps like Scorched Earth, but you never really know, as I think the Megatheriums are on Scorched Earth or something. There's no, it's the Direwolves, isn't it? Yeah, Direwolves are on Scorched Earth, which is a little bit weird, so you don't really know what to expect, but I'm pretty sure this thing isn't on Scorched, and I don't think it's on Arboration either. But either way, on the island, which is the map which kind of matters the most, as most people have it, it is obviously there, and you have the insect cave in the redwoods, so this is pretty much the most sustainable way of getting cementing paste. Yes, a beaver dam may be easier, but this is going to give you even more cementing paste, and you can always rely that you'll get the same amount every time, and there won't be the risk of beaver dams not spawning. And in at number 1 is the Velonosaur, and I really think this creature should be respected a lot more when it comes to Ark, especially considering I am playing through Extinction again at the moment, and I have just fell in love with this creature. There is just so much good about it. It is so cool, and its abilities are actually very useful. For starters, it is actually a very good travel mount, having a lot of speed and barely any stamina drain, which is perfect for a travel mount. Also, its saddle really isn't very expensive as well, and its taming method is very easy. You just build a simple 2x2 trap and then net gun it if you want to. Instead of building a trap, you don't need to net gun it in the trap. That's unnecessary. You can either put it in a basic trap or net gun it, and then simply trank it out, and then you have yourself a great Velonosaur. Sadly, the turrets which they fire, or the bullets, not the turrets, they do not scale when you level up the melee damage, but you can always level up your stamina to shoot even more of these things. And I think when you look at it head on, that animation kind of looks a little bit creepy. Obviously, you don't just have the turret firing ability, although that is the most useful to me. You also just do have your general melee abilities, and it can also shake the spines off of its back too, which you're seeing here. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all enjoyed this one. And as always, comment down below what art creature you think is the most underrated, and I'll see you all later.